Thank you for joining us at the Roundtable.
Brought to you by Community Education Arts, a nonprofit organization based in Noblesville, Indiana.
I'm Alys Caviness Gober, president of CEArts.
And I'm Sarah E. Morin, secretary of CEArts. Let's sit down at the Roundtable.
Welcome back as we continue our interview with writer and artist Alys Caviness Gober.
We've delved a little bit into the fact that this book particularly is so influenced by the pandemic and how it affected you emotionally and as a person. How do you think it affected you when it comes to the nuts and bolts of writing and creating art?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, and one of the reasons the book is so small, and I mean in size, in quantity of poetry and artwork, is because the pandemic and the isolation, you would think, and I know a lot of artists have said this, you would think with all that time on my hands, I would have been so prolific. I mean, back in the day before COVID-19, it wasn't not unusual for me to be working on seven paintings at one time, writing 7 or 8 poems a day, in between doing everything else I was doing before the pandemic. Pandemic hits, I have all this time on my hands, and I was, again, I had no inspiration. I just was like, what? I've got nothing to say because I'm just scared. I'm sad. I miss my family. I miss my grandson. I was, because before the pandemic, I was taking care of him Monday through Friday while his parents were at work. I had him all day long from the time he was born. And, he turns a year old and suddenly he's just not here, I mean, I was grieving in a way, if you come to think of it. I just realized that, so I mean, there was just something stultifying creatively about the way I was handling the pandemic. And so finding words to express the feelings, the emotions that I was going through early on in the pandemic, a little bit later, at any time in that 404 days, finding words was challenging. And I would jot down a line or what I would call a draft of a poem, which in the past, I have drafts. I just wrote poetry. I didn't go back and change them. It's just like, they were done. Very rarely would I rewrite a poem, I was finding myself working on the poems, working on paintings. I would do literally I paint in layers. I've always painted in layers, and I always think of it as the farthest away is what I paint first, and then I come forward, because that's the only way I know how to paint as a self-taught artist. Things in the foreground should be painted last. And I would put down one color, and 3 weeks later then put down whatever the next color. I mean, it was taking me forever to paint a painting. It was crazy. I still have paintings on my easel. I have 2 stacked paintings on my easels that aren't done. It's just crazy. So I think the biggest challenge that's different from the previous books was just the work involved. It wasn't easy. I mean, always before, paintings and poetry and writing just flowed. I would get inspired and or type, done. This was not like that. This was work. It was weird, and work is a weird word. That effort. This was effort. This was searching for the right words, searching for the right images to put on canvas, and to take an image from my brain and have it go from out my hand onto canvas has always been a problem for me. That's always difficult because I'm not technically the kind of painter that can just paint what I see easily. I have to, from my brain to my hand to the canvas, it goes through some sort of permutation of what I see to what I'm actually able to execute, technically. So all of that just got harder in a way. Does that make sense? I'm not sure.
No, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah. I have that same where I have, like, in music particularly, I'm like, I know what I want it to sound like, but where are the notes?
Yeah, what are how come I can't just make that go boom? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think for me, the painting thing is one thing. The challenges with that is one thing, because I've always been sort of challenged as an artist, like I said, being self-taught. The challenge to execute what I want to put on canvas has sometimes always been a challenge. But the past, for this book, the stuff that I created during that 404 days, it was even more so. But I think the bigger challenge was writing, to find not cliched phrases, or to use cliched phrases in a way that worked, to the dark and stormy night. Well, how else can I say a dark and stormy night? What I'm saying? That became more of a challenge than it was before COVID-19. To find the words to express what I wanted to say in a way that other people could relate to, because I knew this was going to be a book. These weren't just poems I was writing for myself. They were, but I also knew it was going to be volume 4. In my draft document, on Word document, said Naked in Wonderland volume 4. I knew what I was working on. So the subtitle took a while to come to, but so anyway, that was the biggest challenge, I think. The big more so than even writing through the grief of losing both of my parents through 2 different prior volumes. It was hard to find those words sometimes, but this was different. This was harder because I just didn't want every poem to sound maudlin.
Sure.
That word just kept, I don't want it to sound like I'm just, poor me, So that was a big challenge.
Sure. I would love for you to read a selection or 2 or 3 from volume 4.
All right. Well, I have some flagged, and I was trying to find ones that weren't too horrible. Let's see, this one or that one. I wanted to find, at least one that was sort of from the beginning. This is one I call Sleepless in Quarantine. In a whirlpool of darkness, swirling, a composition, mired in this odd exhaustion, born of terror and tedium and turmoil, birthed by discord and doubt and the paralyzing grip of cognitive repetition. This is life and death. This is life or death. This is life and death. This is life or death. Like floodwaters creeping up and seeping in, or a chalice of desolation overflowing, becomes an eerie, blurring cacophony. This nocturne's dissonant notes pound out isolation's senseless lonesomeness, echoing within this chasm of ever-deepening emptiness, and sleep eludes. That's kind of maudlin, but I can't tell you how many sleepless nights, and that this is life and death. This is life or death. That's what COVID-19 was. It was like, if I break my isolation, I could die. I mean, this was just sleepless in quarantine. I mean,
I think it's extremely relatable, that ruminating. Because, a lot of us were very worried. And just the idea of it keeping us up at night and echoing. And I love that distinction you're making, the and to the or to the and.
I know, because it's an important difference. But what I was really trying to do with this poem is, if you take out that idea of COVID-19 and maybe the life and death part, I don't know, I hoped that people could relate to this in any kind of sleepless night. Whatever you're going through, if it's causing you to have sleeplessness, the rest of the poem is about how that feels, and that kind of just flowing crazy thought, just becomes this and this and this, and so that's what I was going for with that.
Beautiful.
Coming up, the next part of our interview with artist and writer Alys Caviness Gober. This has been At the Roundtable with Alys
and Sarah E.
of Community Education Arts.
Our nonprofit organization is based in Noblesville, Indiana. You can find us online at CEArts.org. We'd like to thank James Weston for writing our intro music and for his technical savvy.
Join us next time
at the Roundtable.